Some egos, if they cannot get praise or admiration, will settle for other forms of attention and play roles to elicit them. If they cannot get positive attention, they may seek negative attention instead, for example, by provoking a negative reaction in someone else. So this reminds me of a more overt style of narcissistic personality style, and I'm speaking about narcissism in the sense of just a personality style. Obviously, there's a spectrum, and I'm not talking about it in the psychology sense because I am not a psychologist, and I'm only speaking from experience. I've had to deal with a few narcissistic style of personalities growing up, and especially during childhood, and so this really reminds me of that. I feel like narcissism is just the ego turned up, and it's just an extreme example, obviously, of just a very strong ego. It's basically someone who's so identified with their mind, that they are deeply unconscious. So one of the patterns I've really noticed about this narcissistic style of personality is that they always seem to be in conflict with someone at some point. They always seem to be in some sort of drama with this person, that person, or this situation, that situation. And you always see that they are always the common denominator with all their stories of like what they're in conflict with. And I feel like that's just because the ego is dualistic thinking, right? It's always thinking like me versus you, black or white, right or wrong. And it really does make me think of that quote, that kind of speaks for the ego, is like, you're either with us or against us. And I feel like with the narcissist, that is definitely turned up, that if you disagree with them or try to tell them like a different way from their belief or whatever, they definitely won't back down, and they definitely have this like, you're either with me or against me kind of thing. So if they make you pick sides, other people who are like innocent bystanders, they always seem to make them also pick sides of like, who are they with? And there's just always constant conflict and constant fighting. And, the ego is always looking to kind of enhance its sense of self and to protect itself through all those negative emotions of anger and rage and all that stuff. And when it comes to role playing, I feel like a person with narcissistic personality style seems to always jump from one extreme to the other of like being either a victim, me and my story or whatever, or the other side where they end up being the villain, not realizing it obviously, but because they're always in conflict with other people and, are very sensitive to criticism, it's like they respond by going into rage at times, like they can't take any constructive criticism even, that they just start raging. And a lot of times it feels like you're walking on eggshells being in a relationship with them or just being around them, period. It's very volatile being around that kind of extreme personality style. I think, my experience of being around those personality styles is it's just been so suffocating, and very demeaning. Even having a relationship with someone with this style of personality is just very challenging because it feels really superficial, it feels really suffocating even. And it's just really a transactional relationship, I feel, because they're either always wanting something from you or just using you to either enhance their sense of self and to somehow make them feel special. And so another common pattern I've seen with this type of narcissistic personality style is how much control they want. I feel like, obviously the ego wants control, but when it's a stronger ego, when it, kind of a bit more on the extreme side, there really is this like need to control everything. And if you don't agree, like, good luck with that. Like, there's no negotiating with them. And so I feel like it's just a way for them to feel safe, to be able to control the environment, control the situation, to basically feel secure in this world. And a lot of times Hollywood, they portray a narcissistic style of personality in a movie, and in the last act, they all of a sudden something happens, and then they all of a sudden lose all their narcissism and are a completely normal person again, and all is forgiven. And unfortunately, life is not really like that. It seems like it's a lot more challenging. It's a lot more harder for the person to kind of let go of the grip of the ego. And obviously with this style of personality, it's a bit more on the extreme side, right? It's a bit more of a stronger ego. There is very little awareness there. And when you try to, even in a nice way, just try to, bring some light to something and bring it to the surface, it's like the ego is so sensitive, they will not even hear it. And so it can be really challenging when you watch these types of movies and then you see that they can change all of a sudden. It's like in real life, that doesn't really happen. It takes, unless like some sort of divine intervention happens, but it's most of the time not going to happen. But Eckhart talks about how the underlying emotion that basically governs all activities of the ego is fear. And so I feel like for that narcissistic style of personality, they are afraid of being nobody, of non-existence, of death, essentially. And so, it's obviously a lot more extreme in the way that they feel fear. And I feel like, could it be because of some sort of trauma that they've, gone through, that they, as a survival mechanism, went into that kind of personality style of narcissism instead? And yeah, and I feel like it is a really challenging personality. I've had to do a lot of healing around that. I'm still on that path of trying to not get triggered and trying not to get, so worked up about this type of personality style. But I guess it just takes time. It just really is about doing the emotional work and trying to, become more aware of it and to let go of my reactions and emotions around it. So yeah. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.